Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Birds on a Blue Note. We got two special guests that are joining us today. You may well recognize them as they are big guys in the Cardinals podcast and prospect region. So welcome, Blake, Kyle. Thanks for joining us again today, guys. How are you both
Hey,
doing?
Yeah, good to be here. Always good to be on the podcast with you guys, and it's always fun to be on podcast with Kyle too. So it should be a fun conversation.
And we
I
got
love you,
JoJo
Blake.
I
making
love
a
you
guest
too,
appearance
and your
here.
dog. Not your dog, your brother's dog.
He's my dog now.
He's your.
Hey, your brother. Oh,
Look
goodness.
at him. Look how handsome he is. Oh my God. Mwah.
He's a good boy. Other JoJo is a bad boy right now.
Yeah, he just popped up the lead. That was a fluky double to O'Neill Cruz, though. So it's what are you gonna do?
Yeah, baseball's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful game, man. Wonderful game. Hell of a game.
Pull your hair out. I mean, look at Kyle.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm joining him there.
It looks beautiful. It's beautiful.
You should go just like full George Costanza and just all the way around.
All right. So let's get into some of the prospect talk and everything. Starting off more with like rookie ball and everything. I know we do have a couple of our top 30 that are technically listed in there. Is there anybody that you guys have been looking at other than like Mejia and of course, Franco?
Kyle, you can start on this one.
Look, no, the answer is no. I'm not looking at anyone. I, you know, I really don't. I'm still in the process right now where I'm trying to take in the organization. I think the organization's in a weird spot, is kind of what I think. And I think we're still learning about them. I think we're still learning about all these players in a really organic kind of way. Even some of the top end guys, even some of the lower end guys, I would not. I don't know. It's hard to say, Blake. I'm gonna take a cue from you.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I generally don't pay that much attention to like complex league guys or Dominican Summer League guys, other than like, oh, hey, that 900 OPS looks great.
Yeah.
Because we don't really have anything other than surface level stats. And it's kind of hard to know how those stats are going to translate once they get into full season ball. We don't have any video on these guys or any data. It's hard to look at it besides like, hey, he seems like he's doing really well right now, which could be a good sign for the future, but it doesn't necessarily mean everything.
No.
Yeah, the advice I always give with the complex kids is just let them live and pretend like they don't exist. And I mean, it's fun to, just like Blake said, it's kind of fun to look at the stats and be like, oh, this Jose Suarez, to give our friend Kareem a little shout out, like this Jose Suarez might be kind of interesting, and then he busts onto the low A scene and starts hammering the baseball. So, don't just try not to invest too much in what's going on down there.
Makes sense, obviously. Perfect. Then let's move on to our A ball guys. Obviously, we got the low ball and the high ball in A. And I don't know about you guys, but like one of the guys that I've actually been really getting hot on recently is Honeyman down there. That 1,000 OPS looks kind of nice.
Yeah, it's the same story with that young man. If he can stay healthy, he does really interesting extra base hit stuff, and a lot of it's doubles, some of it's triples. But he's a toolsy guy. It's just he can't stay healthy. He's back on the unless they activated him in the last couple days. He's back on the IL.
Oh, you're right. He's on the IL still.
He is.
Yeah, he's really interesting. He was one of the guys I was actually most looking forward to seeing this year. So it kind of sucks that he's back on the IL, because I would probably a little bit lower on Honeyman than the general consensus, and it's just because I think there's a world in which he's kind of fringy at everything. To put it not in like not the nicest light, but he does a lot of good things on the field, and I really wanted to see him play, and so I can actually form like a somewhat harder opinion of him. And he's done really, really well in the games that he's played in. He just hasn't played enough.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're exactly right. So that's someone I was pretty high on. And Zach, who had to miss tonight, is also very high on Honeyman. He was telling us when we draft him, it's like, oh, this guy can match. All he does is hit, and he hits and hits. And then he just gets on the IL again. And then he comes back, and it's kind of like that 2021 O'Neill where like you're off the IL and you're on fire, and then you go back on the IL and you're worthless. So it's just it's a weird thing with him. Another guy,
it's even more him just because he's missed so much time, and not even with since being drafted, leading into him getting drafted. So like it's reasonable to expect that maybe some of the tendencies that we would see in such a small and when he's healthy, such a small sample, are probably illusory at best. So like Blake is saying, we got to necessarily know if the underlying stats that we are seeing, the underlying metrics, I don't even know if those are necessarily telling yet. I know that I watched him jump on a bunch of fastballs, and sometimes you can get away with that at low A, and not end up being anything special by the time you get to double A. So just got to get him healthy.
Yep, just consistent playing time. I agree. The guy that's in low A probably that I'm the most high on, like aside from Honeyman, if he ever stays healthy, is Lynn, which I know you guys have probably talked a lot about. He's got the plus fastball, obviously, and he's super tall and lanky. And is there anything you want to touch on specifically that you guys have seen from him that like most, I guess, average prospect fans wouldn't know?
Yeah, I think Chen Wei Lin is a super, super interesting player. And I think he hasn't even really scratched the surface of his potential yet. Like when you look at his numbers, they're not like phenomenal. They're good. Like a 340 FIP and single A is good. A 24-ish strikeout rate's fine. Like, but when you look at him, he throws his fastball so hard. I think the shape is a little iffy, and that's something that he can improve. You would expect to see a fastball thrown that hard miss more bats than it does. And it's a similar thing with Edwin Nunez, though not as bad. I think Edwin Nunez's fastball is actually pretty terrible, just compared to like the velocity it's thrown at. Lynn's isn't that bad, and it can get better too. I think he's also a guy who's just super tall and super lanky, so he really has to figure out how to use his body a little bit better. But when I look at him, man, like that is a legitimately extremely promising fastball, and his changeup is downright nasty. The slider's not great, but when you throw 100 miles per hour on your fastball, you can get away with a fringy slider because people are geared up for the heat. So I think he's a guy who's super interesting, and I think we're only going to see him get better.
I think one of my favorite things about him is that sorry, I'm trying to decide which angle I want to go away. The thing that's really interesting about him is that you can probably learn a little bit from his success and also kind of apply it to Honeyman's in a reverse kind of deconstruction kind of way. He throws his fastball a lot. And because of the angle it comes from, because he's so big and so tall, it pretty well comes from what seems over. You get the impression that like it's just too much for those low A hitters to handle. So he can throw his fastball 70% or 80% of the time he wants. But I think that we're going to see him get into some real trouble with it as he moves up the ladder. It kind of reminds me of like I used to get really excited about Johan Paniagua as a low A pitcher. And now Paniagua has an incredibly strong curveball sometimes. And while Lynn's changeup is kind of his secondary pitch that's most exciting, I don't know if I necessarily think that that like Lynn's repertoire has that potential all the way around. So I'm anxious to see more of him. I think he's a beautiful little trade piece. And but I don't necessarily know. I know that I do really like watching him because as opposed to a lot of other taller, big right-handers that are kind of svelte or even like bigger built, he commands the ball pretty well. He doesn't know where his slider's going, but he commands his changeup and his fastball pretty well for his size, and that is really promising.
Yeah, I agree. Kyle, actually, to kind of touch on what you were talking about with the fastball, I think that's something we really saw with Quinn Matthews when he was in single A, was he
Yeah.
could get away with throwing his fastball like 70, 80% of the time and just blow hitters away with it. And we saw him go up to high A and double A, and he's now showing a more balanced arsenal because he has that in him and he's still having that kind of success. I think that's something I also would want to see Chen Wei Lin be able to do whenever it is that he ascends the ladder.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that completely too. Because once you reach like the majors or even start playing like the higher level minor league guys who are kind of fringe MLB players, they can sit fastball all day long. They've seen 100 however many times. So you almost always have to have that plus off speed. Otherwise, you're just going to get hammered once you reach the higher levels. And it happens in the majors too. I mean, look at like early on with Jordan Hicks when he was struggling to throw that fastball. He couldn't locate it. And you were like, how is he not missing more bats? He throws 104 and 105. But when you're just sitting on it, it's easier to make contact. So just to make a comparison, an MLB player.
Yeah.
A guy in Peoria I wanted to touch on towards the bottom of our top 30 was Hansen. He's actually been doing really good in July. Last start, 7 2/3, 3 hits, no runs, no walks, 10 strikeouts. In July, he's at 18.2 innings pitched, 23 strikeouts in 3 games.
Yeah,
Like,
this is about when Pete Hansen came on last year too. He doesn't have much velocity in the tank, but his off speed stuff in particular, when he's commanding it and using it quite a bit, it'll keep those unseasoned low level hitters off of it. Yeah, I actually like Pete Hansen probably more than most, but I really don't know what his future is. He might stall out by the time he gets to AA. I know they rewarded him at the end of last year with the AAA appearance. I think they expected and thought more would come of him this year than has. But look, you want to see success early in the season more than you want to see it late in the season, in my opinion, because usually that's when the talent level is kind of it hasn't quite adjusted yet. You haven't seen guys get aggressively promoted, so you can usually get a good read about the second month of the minor league season, third month of the minor league season, maybe fourth month. But it's just nice to see him come out of it a little bit because they need that from an organizational depth standpoint.
Yeah, I mean they do, and I think Hansen's another guy who's interesting in the sense of he came in and he was really polished. He had a lot of command. He commanded his entire roster. He mixed his pitch as well, and those are usually the kinds of guys that can get away with that. They can have success in single A and high A. Once they start getting into double A, triple A, the lack of stuff that they don't possess really starts to show. So what I want to see is when Hansen gets into those upper levels, how does he combat that? Because I think there's a way, if he really locates that slider well down into the glove side and the changeup down into the arm side, and he mixes his pitch as well. Like I don't think his stuff is great, but it's not a death sentence. I think there's a way where he can get around it. I'm not super high on him just because I mean you even saw like single A hitters kind of hit his fastball around a little bit. He's going to have to hide that pitch as he goes up to higher levels. And that's something he could do. He could go like the Sem Reversa route and throw his fastball like 20% of the time if he's a guy who really can command his slider and his changeup in the zone. I think a lot of times these guys like to use those off-speed and secondary pitches as chase pitchers where they try to get hitters to expand and get swings and miss that way. But if you're going to throw your fastball 20% of the time, you're going to have to be able to throw a slider and change up in the zone and live with it. And I think that's really going to be one of the steps that I want to see Hansen take as he starts to get into these upper levels.
And like you said before, that's pretty true of a lot of these young pitchers. They rely a lot on their fastball and not their secondary pitches right now, except for the guys that are, only topping 85. They have to be a little more sneaky and like Greg Maddux style. But yeah, I'd really like to see a lot more development. And, hopefully with Bloom in the organization as well now, we can get some of that, pitching development properly on track within the minor league system and everything.
Yeah.
Because we have not invested well in pitching development at
I
all.
think our organization's kind of in a weird spot this year overall, because if you look at like most of our prospects that we're the most high on right now, it's mostly pitchers. It's people that kind of coming out of nowhere. It's like Quinn Matthews is like kind of came out of nowhere. Someone that I know, like you guys are close to the Kareem. I'm actually pretty high on Darlin Saladin as well. He's kind of having a breakout year. Obviously, Kyle's favorite prospect, Cooper Herpy, who is going to be our future number 3, I guess, behind Quinn Matthews and Tink Hens. We'll see how that goes. It's strange. But it's kind of like until recently, like with Sajaci kind of catching fire a little bit and Chase Davis hitting better. It's been mostly the pitchers that have been like kind of carrying the minor league system, as far as like our top guys that we've been looking at, like having good years.
Yeah. It seems like really, Jimmy Crooks dealt with, and I know you guys are kind of doing it level by level, but Jimmy Crooks dealt with some injuries here and there. But the two most consistent offensive performers that they've had from the start to the end are, I mean, Leo Bernal got off to a kind of a slow start for Peoria, but it's been Bernal and Crooks, and then of course some of the fringier process. I'm sorry.
And Prado has been.
Yeah, for sure. It's a different kind of consistent in his inconsistent ways. But you're right. Like it has been those 3 in kind of a silent, quiet way.
Yeah, I mean the Cardinals literally have so many good catching prospects in the system that it's hilarious to me that they're the only ones who are really like hitting the ball well. And you even go down to like single A and you have a guy like Sammy Hernandez. And it's like, can the Cardinals just put like 9 catchers in the field and just tell them to go play wherever and just get their bats in the lineup? Because the rest of the hitting core in the minors really isn't that promising. Other there are guys who are down that can do better and whatnot, but it's really been the catchers who've been super impressive this year.
Yeah, but we'll still probably start Pajes and Contreras would be our DH. And Pereira's going to toil in AAA forever.
Oh man,
it's interesting for sure because like Yeah, you go into the year, you're like, oh man, we get Jordan Walker and Victor Scott, and then Mason Wynn, you hope like makes a big impact, and he has. But then like Jordan Walker's having a down year. So JC just till recently was having a down year. Chase Davis is having a down year. Cho's having a down year. Everyone, you're looking at like these guys, you're like, yeah, these are going to be the core.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of struggling simultaneously until really recently. So hopefully, I mean, like you look at Chase Davis's June, I had it written down 333, 464, 683 slash line, 5 home runs, 23 RBIs. And then July he's hitting 200 again. You're like, okay, did he just like, is he having a slow start to July or is it kind of a fluky June? Or I don't know what to make of him because he wasn't very good last year. And then he showed flashes again this year. Like, this is why he was first rounder. And now he's like kind of back to that inconsistency, like you guys are saying.
Yeah, keep in mind, July's been a weird month just with the way that the minor league season has been. We're already at the 23rd, but there's 4 days in the middle that are missing. They changed the schedule a little bit during the 4th of July week. And also, I just think sometimes there's an adjustment period once they get to know him a little bit, and once he starts raking a little bit. And usually the players who end up being free swingers end up being a little bit streakier in the first place.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some streakiness that might just be inherent to his game. And it's also important to keep in mind he's been tweaking his swing a lot throughout the year. He really messed with it like in the offseason, in the spring training. We kind of saw it like the beginning of the season, then it went away. And now he's been like progressively kind of quieting his swing over the course of the season. And I think there's just a certain level of comfort that he's probably going to have to get to with his swing before he's really going to be able to continue hitting it like any level of consistency.
I agree too, because I've watched him a lot because he's one of my favorite prospects personally. Because he had that toe tap, and then he got rid of the toe tap, and then he started hitting again, and he kept it off, and then he stopped hitting, and he got it back again. It's kind of like Gorman in the majors right now. I feel like every time he goes through any sort of slump, changes something just a little bit until he hits again, and then he's eventually streakiness, right? And then he stops hitting again, and then he changes something again, and like I don't know, maybe just pick one thing and stay with it, and I feel like that's gonna be better off for the long run, but. What am I say? Like I'm just sitting here behind a camera, I'm not a top prospect by any means. I'm in a men's rec league softball, hitting wall scrapers, so completely different.
Yeah, but I mean, the truth be told, the same fundamentals kind of apply to all of that. I just think things are working, and then you go on a stretch of like 10 at bats where you strike out 7 times, and you think, well, it's not working anymore. I got to get out of this. How do I get out of it? And all of a sudden you've changed drastically and it's actually hurt you in the long run. But you're just trying to rediscover it because what you were doing wasn't working, because it's not always mechanical, it's usually mental. And that's
be some bad luck too, like because it's baseball, right? You're gonna hit like Burley last year. I know Trevor and we were part of the Burlevers fan club because we watched him last year while he struggled in our beer community, and people were like, trade him, get rid of him. You're like, yeah, it's like this is a top 100 guy who doesn't strike out and makes elite contact and has elite bat to ball skills. He's just hitting it hard for outs. I promise it will get better. I mean, you look at tonight's game. He got Skeens out in the 9th. Thank God, we're up 2-1. We got Helsley, and so knock on wood that works out. But yeah, sometimes you just need a little bit of patience with some of these guys and just stay consistent. And like that's what like to go on the majors. That's what Burley said. Carpenter said to him is like just stay consistent, believe in yourself, and stop changing things, and you'll be good. You got the skill set, just write it out.
Well, and that's why also getting to see these guys actually live, video, stuff like that. Sometimes these stats can be pretty deceiving if you're just looking at their lines and stuff like that, because you're not seeing for pitchers how hard the balls are getting hit, or for the batters, are they actually like hitting hard right into an out and whatnot. One guy that is actually doing well in our A-ball system that's a hitter is Cho. I mean, he's been doing really well. Last 10 games, 353 batting average, 405 on base. I mean, he's, in my opinion, he's an on base machine. And I mean, he's only 22. So like a 20-0, not 22. So, I mean, like he's still going to get more power over time. I mean, at least I feel like he is. He's one of the guys that I feel like our luck with South Korea continues there.
Yeah, it's been good to see some signs of life from him because, frankly, I was not expecting him to struggle the way that he did to start the year. I mean, I know he's young and like a 20-year-old playing in high A is an aggressive assignment, but he really handled himself well in single A last year. And one of the things he's always had going for him has at least been like somewhat of a solid ability to make contact. And that really has just disappeared this year, striking out like in a third of his plate appearances, which has really, really been tough to watch. Honestly. So it's been great to see him like start to show some of those tools that make him such an exciting prospect again. And I do think there's a lot of power in the tank. If he can just learn how to square the ball up a little bit better, because he's not always great at doing that, he's going to start showing more of it. And I think just letting him sit here at Peoria all of this year and figure things out is has been good for him.
They started feeding him a steady diet early on in the year, high fastballs, and he could not do anything with it. He didn't know what to do with it. I think he was prepared for everything else, but I don't think he was prepared for that like consistent high heat. And because of that, as happens, it's kind of like Chase Davis a little bit, where you talk about just changing things and trying to adjust. Well, what happened is he starts adjusting to the high fastball, and then they're just dropping stuff on the outside quarter of the plate. And he was getting really frustrated. I don't remember. Now, we don't get to watch last year specifically. We didn't get to watch Palm Beach a lot. But when we did, I don't ever remember him getting fired up about the zone at all. Of course, then again, there is ABS at low A, and there is not a in high A. So it could have been that, but like he was getting frustrated by it. So it's been nice to see him take advantage of good pitches to hit, really. And he did this last year. This is about the time that he came on last year too. It was a little earlier, but he started getting hot with the summer. So hopefully it continues.
I think it's fair to say, I don't know, your guys' analysis, this isn't baseball at all, but just as far as like aesthetically pleasing swings to look at.
Yeah.
Show might have the best one in the system. Major leagues included. He has that beautiful lefty. It's almost like Griffey-esque. And it makes sense that he struggle with the high fastballs because it doesn't look like he even swings high. It's like everything is kind of naturally, he's kind of got the like uppercut to it.
Yeah, I think everything about him is just super aesthetic, honestly. It's the swing, it's the bat flips, it's the way he catches the ball out in right field sometimes. Like everything about
Twitter
his
with the
game is
dog.
so smooth and so fun to watch.
Yeah. The way he runs, the way he glides out in the field, like it's deceiving because actually when you're watching him, if you can like pan out a little bit, he takes awful routes. He's actually not a very like he's so quick and he can get to the ball, but he takes awful routes to the ball regardless of where he's at. But it looks so graceful while he does it that it's kind of in conflict when you're evaluating. But he's just such a true athlete that it comes naturally to him.
It's almost like Victor Scott in that way, where the speed makes up for a lot of bad routes until it doesn't. But it's really hard to evaluate because you see a guy as smooth and fast as them, but then they're just terrible at taking routes to the ball.
Yeah, that was something I did not expect when Victor Scott started the Major League Club this year were the routes, because all we heard about is how great his defense is. He was the Gold Glover and was it AA, AAA last season, and he's a phenomenal outfielder. He's going to be plus out there, and he made good catches still, but he like made bad initial jumps on almost everything hit his way. It's just I don't know if it was like a mental thing for him, and
it's weird. So you got to remember the size of these minor league stadiums in comparison to major league stadiums. There's a lot more in the background going on. There's a lot more to see with the bat coming off the ball. And it's just one of those things that there's some guys that it just takes a little bit more time to make that adjustment of like getting the proper angles again and kind of zoning out that background because
yeah. I will say with him, and I remember being on radio locally 101 in spring training, and just kind of casually being like, "Hey, his routes are not particularly. He's going to make up for it with speed." So you're right. The added stimulus of a major league outfield, playing a major league outfield, should always be part of an evaluation process. But this actually dates back to last year in the minors at high A and double A, specifically double A, specifically coming in on balls and going side to side. He was always pretty good at going back on balls. But like this is part of his game that was there. And I believe Blake talked about it in his Cardinal Nation write-up. And, it was there. It's just, we're still you would think by now, with all of the people who have won gold gloves who don't deserve gold gloves, that we'd be smart enough to be like, oh, that's probably happening at the minor league level too. And like Carson Kelly won a gold glove. And I think that kind of gives you an idea of like
Marcell Ozuna.
exact. Well, and the major leagues, like Carson Kelly won a minor league Gold Glove. It kind of gives you an idea, like, okay, you're steady, you're flashy, you do some good things. There's a lot to grow on, and that's usually that people who end up winning the minor league Gold Glove. And sure, some of those guys go on to win the major league Gold Glove, and some of those guys deserve it. Some of them don't. But that's just how it works. It's a weird little award that is just supposed to bring excitement to baseball while giving a sponsorship a chance to shine.
Yeah, speaking of the Gold Gloves, I still need to check out that Rawlings Center here. I don't know if any of you guys have done that yet. It looks super cool. I've seen video of it. I haven't been there yet. I really want to go.
Me too.
Moving on to Double A. I know you guys touched on him a little earlier, but Crooks, I mean, he's one of those guys, another one of our catchers that, I mean, you got to wonder if any of these guys become trade pieces with how many catchers we have that are firing right now, ultimately.
You never really know what the Cardinals write because they like to just hoard prospects and then never like clear out some of it until they get to the majors and it's like, all right, we're gonna let Pedro Pages play and Ivan Herrera be down to AAA. Oh, by the way, Michael Ciani, no, we've got Michael Ciani. We don't need whoever the next great center fielder is. We don't need him. We got Michael Ciani. They'll do that. They'll do the same. There is some frustration there for sure. I do think that they have the depth to trade if they decide to use catching depth as part of their packages to acquire starting pitching. I love Jimmy Crooks. I've said it before, maybe a couple dozen times anytime I get to talk about the kid, but when the Cardinals drafted him, there was a large portion of Oklahoma fans and coaches and teammates that would be in my DMs when I tweet about him and be like, you guys don't even know how awesome this kid is. Like, you don't even know how real this kid is. This guy is. He's so everybody loves him. And that's important for catchers. Pedro Pages has that, and that's part of why the Cardinals love him. Part of why the Cardinals love Jimmy Crooks too. But look, there's power that he hasn't tapped into yet. He's starting to. It's mostly pull power. He's got a really good hit tool. Everything is kind of on a line, kind of drops in front of the outfielders. He can use that like over the shortstop's head, left center field gap. He's a really fun prospect to watch.
And he's got a great baseball name.
He does. And I echo everything Kyle just said. That's the thing that always stands out to me every time I watch him is I feel like I watch him taking that bat and he's just scorching the ball on a line somewhere. And there's definitely more power in his game. I don't know if he's going to find it, but the guy's going to be an extra base hit machine with the way that he just hits line drives all across the field.
Yeah, that's something I don't think I would even say anything about either. I wouldn't tell him at all, like, hey, we need to hit from more power, like kind of like the Walker thing that's going on right now, however you perceive that. Cards Nation's pretty split on that. I wouldn't change anything about his swing. If he just wants to hit doubles and singles as a catcher and never hit more than 10, 15 home runs as a catcher with good behind the plate ability, then I'm fine with that. But I don't know. It's very strange because like we had Contreras for 3 more years, including this year, and then we got Pages, who Cardinals seem to be infatuated with, and then we have Bernal, who we haven't even talked about at all, who's actually like higher rated in the prospect depth. And I don't know, it's kind of crazy. You would think that like one of these guys would probably be a trade chip for a pitcher or maybe a right-handed bat. I think we need a right-handed power bat still, but we'll see. I don't know what you guys' opinion on Bernal is either. It's just too many catchers right now. Like it's weird. We're in a weird spot right now organizationally with our hitters particularly.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like to you guys' point, that's definitely one of the ways of using a farm system. I mean, you want to keep prospects coming up the line, playing for a league minimum, and giving you a ton of production, and that's super valuable. But then you also want to be able to provide overloads at certain positions and be able to use that as trade chips to get legitimate players. So I think if the Cardinals do want to go out and get somebody at the deadline, there are certainly guys at the catcher position that other teams might want. They could actually headline deals. Obviously, like you're not trading Crooks for like Tariq Skubal as the headliner, but you know, like you can go get a player that can help the major league roster if you do decide that you want to part with catchers.
Okay, so like not to preview like trade deadline stuff too much because we're gonna get on that in a minute, but we were talking about all the catchers that we have that hit, and one that's been like kind of like very, I don't know, like one Ivan Herrera. Like, what do we do with him? Because he was supposed to be the backup and the catcher of the future, but like now that he has the opportunity to play almost every day, Pages is getting those reps. I'm of the belief that trading him is a mistake, but would you guys trade him for a piece that we would need this season? Or do you think that long term that would hurt us also?
Thanks for letting me start on this one, Kyle. You're such a gentleman.
I love you.
So, see, I don't want to trade Avon Herrera because I'm a big Herrera believer. That like I absolutely, if this was me running the team, he would also be in the majors right now, actually playing and hitting. So he's not somebody I would want to trade. His bat at that position, for as young as he is solid, and I do think that he can get better defensively. His arm can get stronger. Like he's so young, it would be hard for me to give up on a catcher defensively at the age of like 23. So I absolutely would not trade him. But then the other part of my brain is like, well, if the Cardinals are just never going to use him, then like, what is the point of him rotting in AAA? And I think that's more the cynical part of me. I do think he will get used. So I would not trade him to give my
Yeah.
final.
I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I would,
I mean, if you want to
oh,
point to a right-handed bat that's going to perform potentially like Randy Arozarena did after you traded him, that's Ivan Herrera. The catcher out of it, you take the catcher out of it. Some team would trade for him and let him be Salvador Perez, without the 40 home run MVP season, probably. Uh, I, 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 I would not. I think the thing that you do with him is you leave him the hell alone. Is what you do. His arm probably needs to get stronger, although the accuracy of it is really probably the issue. There's probably some explosion in his lower half to get to a little bit more accuracy and arm strength that probably needs to be worked out. But this has never really been a problem for him having trouble throwing runners out. Of course, the major leagues are a whole different beast. But look, the Cardinals, last offseason, right? I remember everybody being like, "Do you trade Gorman? Do you trade Donovan?" For like two off seasons, like, "Do you trade Gorman? Do you trade Donovan?" And
they're
really, the
still saying
villain in
trade
this,
Gorman.
what do you say?
Trade
They're,
Burleson.
they're still saying trade Gorman right now.
Well, yeah, of course, but like that, the issue is that neither of those guys are the villains. We shouldn't be taking their side. We shouldn't be in a position to take a side here. The Cardinals should absolutely keep all of these guys and acquire whatever they need using funds to do it, or use guys that are further down that are a little less expensive for a shorter period of time um, to acquire what they need, because they need every major league capable bat and pitcher that they have in the organization in order to be competitive for years to come. And that's their goal, to be competitive for years to come. So, no, I'm not trading Ivan Herrera. I'm doing everything I can to get him major league ready so that he and Wilson Contreras are your catcher duo next year. And then maybe some team's dumb enough to trade for Pedro Paez. It probably isn't going to happen, but maybe that's what you get. Maybe that's what comes of this in the offseason. But moving Ivan Herrera, in my opinion, for anything short of like a 1-for-1 with, whoever the pitcher is that has controllable years, I would not do it. No, there's not a trade that makes sense in my mind.
Yeah, and like you said, you tweeted about this a few weeks ago, Kyle. Like if they're gonna keep him down there in the minors, they need to make sure they have him on some sort of, strength plan where they're working on his mechanics, his explosion, all that sort of stuff to get him back up as quickly as possible because he has been a very useful right-handed bat for us. So,
And that's something
um,
we've lacked this year. It's weird too. So
I mean, to your point though about trading, from lower depths, like Sagaci's like a perfect, option right there. We're already stuffed in the middle with Wynn and Gorman, somebody like him who's doing really well. Overall, like maybe we can move him for pieces and that and not take away from the major leagues. That's why when I see people being like, "Oh, trade Gorman for, Rooker or something," it's like, okay, you're replacing power for power. We need to add to this team, not take away from people that are scoring runs for us on a nightly basis and
Yeah,
whatnot.
hey, I'm glad
absolutely.
you brought up Rooker too, because that's that's a piece. I don't know what you guys feel about Brent Rooker, but he's got a weird career. They're like, oh, he's 29 and he's only been good for this year. Well, he was good last year too, and that was his first real like full-time chance to play every day. And he's also doing it at the Coliseum half the time with zero protection since they traded away Olsen and Murphy. But yeah, like as you were saying, like, and I kind of wanted to lead into this also with the Herrera questions. Like, say that the A's called and because right along with pitching, which is obvious. We need a pitcher. We're still trying to figure out our fifth starter. We're doing a bullpen game tomorrow, which halfway through the season we've been doing too many bullpen games. But like, would you package Herrera if Herrera is like the leading guy? Would you package Herrera for like a Brent Rooker?
Well, would you do it? Would you do it 1-for-1? I think that's a question. I would not. Look, I'm not a Brent Rooker fan. I don't think if you're going to trade for a right-handed bat with this team, the way it's constructed, they have to be able to play center. It's just bottom line. You have plenty of corner outfielders. That doesn't solve an issue. And bringing in a DH doesn't solve the issue either. And he's not a particularly good outfielder anyway. And he's not going to be a particularly good first baseman. So it's not like you're padding your stats for Goldschmidt next year. Even if Burleson goes to first and Rooker moves to the outfield, you're not making your team better. We've learned that this Cardinals team needs good defense. And sure, maybe Rooker figured something out. Maybe this is sustainable. But I am not doing it. I think Brent Rooker is a trap. I think he's a trap for this organization. I think his right-handed power isn't going to translate here the way that some people think he will. And honestly, like, I don't think that there's a way where, I mean, his bat's more powerful and has a chance of having impact in the lineup, but I don't think he makes the team better as a whole.
Yeah, I'm with Kyle on this one too. I would stay away from Brent Rooker for exactly the reason Kyle mentioned earlier. I don't want the Cardinals trading for another bat first, no glove corner guy. They have those guys. It doesn't like I look at Alec Burleson, who's like right field DH. He's like a 130 WRC plus. That's lower than Rooker because Rooker's been mashing. Like I get it, but it's a similar kind of archetype where I'm fine with just playing Burleson in the outfield and rolling with it. Like I think there's a way where if the Cardinals are going to get somebody to improve this roster, I agree with Kyle. It has to be at center field. And it has to be somebody who's either going to start every day in center field over Siani or is going to platoon with Siani. And Rooker's neither of those guys.
Yeah, if you're building a fantasy baseball roster, Brent Rooker's fine. Perfect. He's a perfect guy you want to trade for. But baseball is not baseball. It's just like our good friend Ben Cerruti, who I cannot wait to break apart in this year podcast because I know he'll listen, who I love with all my heart. He's my little Kansas City brother, my Kansas brother, or Kansas, St. Louis, or whatever the hell is going on over on that side of the state. I don't understand it, to be honest with you. But like today, Ben Cerruti tweeted out like Eno Saris came out with his top pitching. He ranked all the pitchers in baseball, and Sonny Gray was like 21, and then everyone else, the other four guys, are like 180 through like 340. And he's rating those pitchers for fantasy baseball. He's not rating them for baseball in this particular rating. And that's a whole different world. Brent Rooker on this team, if you're taking this roster into your fantasy baseball playoffs, hell yeah, bring me Brent Rooker. But there's so much more to baseball than that, including the assets you would have to trade and also how you would manage the fielding of it all and make the Cardinals better that way. And the only way the Cardinals are going to be good is if that's solid.
No, it makes sense. And the way I kind of viewed it too is because it makes like you look at fantasy baseball, you look at the power numbers and like, yeah, he's sixth in baseball right now in WRC plus, and the people above him are like generational talents, right? So like the way I viewed it also is like we desperately need a right-handed power bat because like I kind of touched on a little bit before we started recording. Goldie's kind of falling off a cliff. He can't hit a fastball anymore. And Arenado we'll see. He's been playing better lately, but the power numbers are still low. And I just don't view like someone as like a Luis Robert a possibility with the Dodgers being interested. I just don't see how any way possibly would outbid them. Because that would hurt a lot, obviously. That would take Walker plus, in my opinion. I could be way off based on that, but we'll see. So like as far as like realistic power right-handed bats, I was like looking at him. It's like, yeah, we could maybe make him work in right and put Newton center if they wanted to play Newton center. And then the very next game, Newton center. It's like it's weird how like this team is kind of worked out this year. Like how many people would have said like, hey, yeah, Alec Burleson and Mason Wynn are going to be our two best hitters in the year of our Lord 2024 for the Cardinals, and Goldschmidt's going to bat seventh. like I don't know. And it's hard to like find the solution like next year for like that right-handed power aside from like Contreras just being phenomenal again if he's healthy, right? So like I don't know. It's weird.
I understand. I definitely understand that. You would be without an acquisition this offseason, you would be going into next year saying, all right, our right-handed bats are going to be Herrera. If you don't trade Herrera, Contreras, Arenado, and Walker. Like you would end up having to commit to Walker, which is dangerous, of course, as we know right
Mhm.
now. But and of course, Brent Rooker would help fill that out in the long run. So I definitely get the thought. But there's something about, I mean, we've seen what it's done to these right-handed bats, what Bush has done to these right-handed bats too. The Coliseum is not exactly the most friendly place to hit either. I'm not trying to, to diminish that, but I just think that you also have to take into account that there's going to be a little change there, and also, again, it worked out with Arenado, but how many bad hitters do we see, or how many good hitters on bad teams do we see go to another team and have a decline? So I think that there's some things there too from a, I guess the periphery or from a non-traceable stat or metric standpoint that need to go into if you want to dig a little bit further. But I like Rooker. I for this team, the way that this team's constructed, like that's an off-season move for me. It's not an in-season move for me.
Yeah, I would be thrilled to watch Brent Rooker mash baseballs in St. Louis. If the Cardinals trade for him, like, great, sign me up. I cannot wait to watch the games. I would be hesitant about what it's going to cost to get him, and I just don't think he's a great fit overall for the roster. He fits the right-handed bat. He doesn't fit anywhere really in the field.
That's fair.
Um,
So, yeah,
no,
it's just like if you look at the market right now, I guess it's very, very pitching heavy, not so much bat heavy, especially like outfielder bats, unless you go on that superstar Luis Rivera type bat, or you bring back someone like a Harrison Bader or Tommy Pham, which I don't really think helps us all that much either. I'd rather just have the defense of Ciani personally. You might not think that. So I don't know, it's just kind of weird. And like if you look out long term even further, it gets a little stranger. It's kind of a tough spot to be in, I think, honestly. Like with obviously Goldschmidt, Arnado, Goldie, I don't know. This might be his last year here. We'll see. You hope Arnado turns it around, but I don't know. It's a tough spot to be in. And like you said, Kyle, Bush kind of kills right hand because you look at like Ozuna, who was like phenomenal in Miami, and then he came here and he was okay.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the Braves and he mashes again. So like it might just be a Bush thing. They might just need to tear down Ballpark Village and get rid of the apartments and right-handers can hit again.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not a great spot to be in though when you don't have the reliable right-handed bat, and especially since Contreras is like he's in his 30s now and he's like a catcher. You don't want to have to count on his production, and you don't want to have to also count on Burleson to repeat. As much as we love Burley here and his elite bat to ball skills, you don't have to count on him to repeat his performance from this year for the offense to just stay afloat in the future. So that's just kind of how I see it. Do
Well,
you
let
have
me
any?
just a quick thought there about the Burleson comment. Would you also be having to count on Rooker to repeat his 2024 season? Because there's also the chance he regresses to what he's put up too. And I think, because he's just such an interesting, inconsistent hitter as well. I think that's just the other part of it, I guess.
Yeah, and it's fair, and that's something I kind of dug into because like it was funny. I was kind of thinking about this too. Like you guys are big on Twitter. BK put the tweet out about Gorman for Rooker, and I was like, I was already thinking about Rooker, but I wouldn't trade Gorman for him just because
Yeah.
30 home run, 90 RBI second baseman don't grow on trees. Like if he keeps up this pace for his whole career, he's going to break the home run record at the position. So like, why would you trade that? That's
Yeah.
silly, right? But at the same time, you look at Rooker's career, and he never really had like full time at bats until last season, where he did still put up 800 plus OPS, and he was on pace for like 30 plus, 100 plus, like the counting numbers that most baseball casuals care for. So like in his time where he got full-time playing time, he's done that consistently, but it's only been 2 years to your point. So
but
you look at
again,
like the Coliseum. So I don't know. It's interesting for sure.
but
Because
right now we need center field, if anything, and that's where like the discussion becomes like the runs that Ciani is saving, how much does that weigh against his bat and the runs that he cost us at the plate? And that's a real discussion that, has to be had inside the front office. Obviously they're going to focus on pitching as well. And I know a name that's been floated around is going out and trying to see if the Giants will, do whatever it takes to get rid of Snell and whatnot. If he's on the table and let's say Giants are willing to eat this year's salary and 20 mil of next year, would you guys take him for, you know, 1 to 2 prospects?
I'm not I will withdraw from this because I don't know exactly what that means. You know what I mean? Like, so I remember I'm that monster who is on Twitter who will berate anybody who uses that stupid trade simulator that could
Oh,
not be any, so I don't really know what to say.
Oh, I don't use a trade simulator at all.
no,
No, it's
think of this more like when we took Nato from Colorado. You know,
God,
it has to be one of those things where they're having real buyer's remorse, want to get rid of him, are willing to do whatever it takes, and are willing to eat money and just take a couple prospects back. So it is an extreme hypothetical, but again, not uncharacteristic for Mo to pull something out of his ass if somebody is like that man is good at finding people who are desperate and taking
yeah.
advantage of them when they are.
I would trade 2 prospects for that cat.
Oh, this is Crash, by the way.
Oh, hi,
He's
Crash.
been sitting at my feet this whole time, probably wondering why a bunch of grown men are yelling at their computers.
Nice.
I mean, realistically though, like who are some, pitchers you guys think that we're gonna go with? Obviously, it's gonna be, guys like a King or a Romero that we're gonna try to like turn around and have them be brilliant with us where they were shipped before and whatnot. But are there any specific, guys you would like us to try to go after that are reasonable?
See, I don't even know because I haven't even looked at this deep enough because the Cardinals, I don't expect them to make any big deadline moves, to be honest. Like, I think they're in a weird spot with rotation where they could look for another starter, but if they're getting like another 4 or 5 starter, like another back end guy, it doesn't move the needle that much. So if they're gonna do it, they probably need to get somebody who's more like a mid to top of the rotation guy, and that's gonna cost prospects that they're probably not going to want to give up. And then you could also factor in the point that they probably want to bring in guys maybe with another year or two of control, which then increases the cost even more. Like, I think they're kind of at a point with this roster where they're going to let it just kind of play the way that it is. Maybe add a reliever, add like again a center fielder or a platoon guy with Siani, and try to roll into the playoffs that way. I would not expect to see any big name starters, and if that changes, like great, depending on the cost. So I haven't looked into it enough, honestly.
Yeah, I trust Katie Woo's reporting, and Katie seemed pretty, at least at this point, and this would have been about a week ago, pretty steadfast that the Cardinals were really only in like the rental market. So I guess the extended rentals like Fetty and Eovaldi might be. I mean, just the same names that you hear recycled everywhere by everybody. Fetty, Eovaldi, potentially Bassett. Those guys. I mean, I still think, as dumb as it sounds, that Patrick Corbin would be in play, whether for good or bad. See what happens with James Paxton. Like that we get exhausted by that, but the Cardinals have had success with that. Like it's annoying and terrible, but they have had success with that.
Yeah,
And
Twitter blows up every time, right? Like, John
let it,
Lackey, what are we doing?
yeah, exactly.
That
Let it blow up. I mean, honestly, if I'm the Cardinals, they're not good enough to win a World Series. It's just that simple. They could bring in Crochet, they could bring in Fetty, and they could bring in Bassett, and they're not going to be good enough to win a World Series unless they luck into one. Unless they do it the way that the Diamondbacks got to the World Series, or with the way the offense started performing, or the way that the Rangers won the World Series, which is to have Eovaldi pitch better probably than he's ever pitched, and aside from when he won one with the Red Sox, and have Jordan Montgomery pitch out of his mind, which could happen. I mean, the Cardinals have those guys that could happen. They could find their Jordan Montgomery, whatever that whoever that ends up being. But because of that, as frustrating as it is, you don't spend major capital on anything other than a rental or or minor capital on something that's going to help you next year in the rotation. But you don't go crazy for Garrett Crochet. I would, but I'm also a psychopath, and I think that that's an important thing that everybody keeps in mind when we start talking about these guys.
No, absolutely. And like that's where I keep trying to set proper expectations for everybody. I'm not expecting like a huge name, but like if you just look at our like past records, Hap, Lester, we got Monty, who was a nobody pretty much at the time. He had no success really with the Yankees. Like JoJo for Sosa, like that was not really anything, and he helped
Ryan
us out.
Manis for free.
So I mean, I'm not expecting like a big name, but like maybe an old name that used to be good that it's like, okay, maybe they need a few tweaks or maybe like one of those under the radar guys like Monty, where they've, analyzed and been like, hey, if this guy throws his fastball more or throws his slider more, we can actually get a lot out of him. Like Duncan was the master of this, and I will forever miss what he could do with these pitchers.
I still think too, and we'll see what happens with the Mets, but I really believe Jose Quintana would still be in play, and I still think that would be a great direction. I don't know what the Mets are kind of on the fringes of the wild card. They've got an owner who still wants to win, but like I think that would be still a very interesting option. I don't know I don't know if there's a way to make it work where you could do a Montgomery for Bader type deal with Quintana with the Mets, but like that, like something like that would really interest me. I've heard UC Kikuchi, someone like that, but
What about
everybody
Flaherty
else.
reunion?
So Flaherty's hurt. I mean, he's been dealing with a back thing all year. And he's been on and off. And I don't think the Cardinals would be as opposed to that as maybe some fans think. Again, we're all just guessing. Don't think that they're going to take a chance with somebody who is dealing with back issues.
Makes
On the
sense.
Cardinals in 2024, back issues.
Yeah. Well, that they didn't draft, or
Yeah.
that they isn't still with the team after being drafted.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because like you go all off season, there was all these rumors about the Mariners and like their young stars and how they had so many and they're trying to offload and they needed middle infield. And now you're like, well, we just drafted JJ Weatherholt, so maybe we could trade him as a JC, for like a woo, and they might kind of be interested. It's a little too late for that, but yeah, I'd be like all in favor for the Quintana thing because like he was our number one starter like last time we made the playoffs and he pitched really well aside from that blow up in the ninth inning. Unfortunate, hopefully it doesn't happen again. But yeah, it's just kind of weird. Like I'm kind of aligned with Blake on this. Unless we're getting like a 1 or 2 type starter, doesn't really make sense because since Palante's been starting, unfortunately, for like the last month-ish, he's been our best starter, which doesn't make sense. But that's just kind of where we are right now. So like it doesn't move the needle at all to push Palante back out in the pen to replace him with someone who might possibly be worse. Um, I don't know. It's tough. It's a weird market right now. Like I think Max Scherzer saying he wouldn't waive his no trade clause like was a bad deal for us because I could see that possibly being something that could work, especially if the Rangers ate a little bit of that money and we sent them someone like it's the JC. But it, yeah, I don't expect anything splashy either. Realistically, it's just especially like with all the buyers right now, there's not very many sellers. I know the Cubs just said, "Hey, we're out," but like with a third wild card in play now, there's so many teams that are in it, and there's going to be insane bidding. And I think anyone's that's worth a 1 or a 2 type rotation spot.
It's going to be a crazy week. The next week is going to be nuts.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. So, just don't expect anything big, Cards fans. Don't expect a big name. So I mean,
Luis
taking a look
Rivera,
at-
Garrett Crochet, breaking news. 10 minutes after this releases.
before this video comes out, we're proven wrong now. Moving on to the draft and the guys that we have there. Obviously, JJ fell to us. I think that's an awesome pick ending up with him if he can stay healthy, obviously. But want to hear your guys' take as to where you feel he fits in with our prospect list now and where they might assign him to start.
Yeah, I loved the JJ Weatherholt pick. I thought there was no way he would make it to 7. And when he fell to 7, like Cardinals, just submit the pick and move on. Like there's not another player available at this spot right now that is better than Weatherholt. I love that he's in the system. I'm actually currently working on my prospect re-ranking like today, like right before this podcast. Actually, I'm waffling on if I want to make Weatherholt 1 or 2. And I think it's more of like a 1A, 1B situation in my mind. I think I'm just going to leave him at 2 until he does like anything. I think he will probably start in Peoria and skip Palm Beach. There's a chance, I think, that the Cardinals just try to rest the hamstring the rest of the year. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but I think it's possible. And then they just let him go into Peoria whenever they think he's ready. And I'm fully expecting him to be the kind of player we all think he's going to be. I think his long-term home is probably going to be at second base, but I sincerely hope he plays shortstop in the minors, just to have that in his pocket. But yeah, absolutely ecstatic that he was available at 7. I think Baseball America just had him as their number 24 prospect in their re-ranking. So, I mean, the Cardinals just grabbed the top 25 prospect in the first round, which is always a win.
Yeah. I love him. I can't get enough of him. I think he's fascinating. I also think that it couldn't have worked out any better for the Cardinals based on where they were drafting. I think part of the thing that I have yet to really wrap my mind around is they weren't supposed to draft seventh, right? They were supposed to draft fifth. So they lost some draft pool, but they also lost a chance to potentially get their guy. And the fact that Weatherholt was there at 7 could not have worked out any better had they been picking fifth. I total guess. My guess would be he still would have been their pick at 5. Had Smith or been on the board, I still think they would have gone to Weatherholt, and I think they would have been right for doing it because he's a pretty complete young man. As you could as complete of an athlete as you can be, as complete of a baseball player as you can be, a worker as you can be at 21 years old. And that's a foundation that you could only hope to build on. Baseball America got it right. He's a top 50 prospect. He's 24 on their list, but he's a top 50 prospect in baseball right away. One of the things that when we were talking to Kareem and I were talking about it a little bit last night on the Hard 9 podcast, and one of the things that he and I said is just you bring up someone like Wyatt Langford. Wyatt Langford was taken by the Rangers, and he's already a major leaguer, but and Weatherholt has that potential with his bat to already be a major leaguer a year away. But that's if you want somebody to hit 250 with a 313 on base percentage and 5 home runs and 70 at bats, or 270 at bats, whatever it ends up being. I bring that up to just remind everybody that we want this kid to have the chance to play short, even though Mason Wynn's going to be our shortstop for as long as he possibly can. We want him to have every opportunity to play short. We want him to have every opportunity to improve his footwork and his arm. Even though his arm's kind of being rated improperly, I would say it's average. People call it below average. Joey, come over here. Come over here. It's not right. We'll call it below average. I think it's better than that. I think he just needs a little bit of work with it. He's just a spectacular young man and a spectacular athlete, and it couldn't have worked out any better for the Cardinals.
He's also super fun to watch too. Like, I don't know if you've guys seen any highlights, but he plays with a lot of emotion. He'll run around on the field like a maniac after he makes a great play. Like it's so much fun to watch, and he'll bring a lot of energy to the field. It's always great to watch those guys.
And he seems like that blue collar type of guy, like that is gonna put in the work. Like he seems like a good fit for the Cardinals, and his interview just solidified that. And like you can see that man in St. Louis walking around with his cowboy hat on, chatting everybody up and all
My
that sort
girlfriend
of
was like, he looks a lot like Aaron Judge in the face, doesn't he? I was like, goddamn right he does.
stuff.
He's beautiful, isn't he?
He's gorgeous.
Like, yeah, yes.
Tears.
Get the bolo tie.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I
Um,
was ecstatic about that pick too. I like we did our pre-draft predictions, and I think I got 1 out of the top 10 right. I actually had us taking Montgomery because I thought Weatherholt was already gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, that worked out perfectly. Like as soon as Nick Kurtz was taken, like, oh man, we have a shot. Like we're gonna get one of the 3 guys because like to me it was like Smith, Weatherholt, or like at the time who was left is Jack, right? So like one of those guys, I'll be over the moon because like as much as I like Montgomery, like he's like to me like a half a tier below that.
mhm.
So yeah, it worked out perfectly as you said.
I don't know about you guys if you liked any other picks that we had, but that kid out of Vandy, he looks pretty promising to me.
Yeah, he was probably my favorite pick after the Weatherholt pick. Because I think the Cardinals have the potential to just pull a ton of value out of the 7th round of this draft. I mean, you look at a guy like him, and really, it's just can he stay healthy? Because the stuff is electric. He's a really, really good pitcher. He just hasn't pitched enough. And if his arm is fine, like he has a really good fastball in 2 distinct breaking ball shapes. He spins them well. In the minimal innings that he's thrown and the little bit that I've seen, it looks like he actually puts them where he wants to. Like I think there's the chance that he is the best pitcher the Cardinals took in this draft, despite the fact that he was like the 3rd or 4th arm that they took.
Yeah, that he's their best. I said it the other night. Like he's probably their best draft pick that isn't Weatherholt. Even if it doesn't pan out, even if he ends up having another injury, like I don't know if you could argue that they spent a pick more wisely than that. I'm not as high on Finley, the next pick that they had, the lefty out of Notre Dame, as everyone else seems to be. But I'm also just leery of lefties at this point. I'm just exhausted of the lefties the Cardinals have drafted, other than Jerpy. So I'm a little dauber down on that. But I also think he's a really interesting player. And like I said on draft day, like I'd prefer that they take that chance on the 8th round than they did in the past in like the 2nd round with Bryson Mounts. Or I like that pick way better than I like their 5th round pick. I think that Braden Davis is what I mean. We'll see what that is. You know, so I think that what they did in the 1st round, 8th round, 7th round, and 8th round, and then what they did in like rounds 10 beyond are really fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah, Brendan
don't
Lawson.
about, no, go for it, RJ.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's like, yeah, that Brendan Lawson pick. That was an interesting one, right? Like he's already committed to Florida. Like I know he's one of the top, who's like the top Canadian prep player in the draft. What do you put the percentage of us actually? I think he's the only one left we haven't signed. What do you put the percentage of us actually signing him at?
It's like negative a million. They
Negative a
it's
million.
like there's like no money left in the budget. I
Negative
think
a million.
I think I'm glad he agrees with me. I think this was just an insurance pick. Like if Weatherholt fails a medical,
Yeah.
if he doesn't sign, they then have bonus pool money to go and give it to him. And since everybody else, I think everybody else has already signed, they're just not gonna pick him up.
All right, go ahead
Yeah.
with what you said initially, Blake. I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say, Kyle, don't leave out. You said rounds 10 through the rest of the draft are really interesting. And I agree, but don't leave out the 9th round pick here, Cade McGee.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that pick at 9. I think Cade McGee is a really, really interesting player.
Yeah.
Really solid defensive third baseman, really exceptionally good at pulling the ball in the air. There's a legit path for him to be like an actual, somewhat power hitting, solid defensive third baseman moving forward. You typically don't get the chance to draft a guy like that in the 9th round.
Yeah, there's a real like David Freese chance here. Honestly, I'm not like that's what I think. I think that there's a real major league third baseman, journeyman type here with potential for 20 home runs and a 270-ish average if he continues to develop. Because I think the swing will translate. I think his approach has a potential to translate, and I think that he's a type of bat that this Cardinals coaching staff at the minor league level really excels with. You're right that I think Campos is fine. I think Cross is fine, but I just do like McGee the best of that top 10 rounds group hitters. That isn't what they're holding.
And it's so interesting because we love the 1st round pick, and then like our next 2 favorite picks are the 7th and the 9th rounders. Like I really did not enjoy how the Cardinals started day 2. I think they took a string of names that just aren't really that exciting, honestly. And then all of a sudden it's like the 7th round hit and they just flipped a switch. And I liked every name they took after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Flores is like, oh, I should start doing my job today. That's right.
I think sometimes it feels like they're just too cautious in rounds, like even 2 through like 5 or 6 typically. Like they'll take those guys who really just feel like the 4A dependable, like command pitchers or guys who just have a little bit of a package of everything. And then once it gets like later enough in the day 2 and 3, that's when they really start shooting big on like tools and guys who maybe aren't as they actually try to actually take shots on guys, and that's the kind of draft strategy that I appreciate.
Yeah, and
It's
honestly, those middle guys that we get, a lot of them are the ones that project to be like, middle end relievers or late inning, back end starters, stuff like that. So and then yeah, as you say, we're going with Andrew in the 7th round suddenly, and we're taking some guy that, coming out of high school possibly could have been a 1st rounder and everything. And it's like, there's the upside I've been looking for rounds 2 through 6 and everything.
yeah. And you wouldn't, I mean, at the same time, like I've been very critical of some of their draft strategies in those top 5 rounds with pitchers in particular. But I'll be honest, I would understand. I understand their trepidation with it because the pitchers that they've drafted or signed internationally that do have big stuff never work. It just doesn't ever work out for them. Even like Zach Gallen to a degree, that he doesn't necessarily fit that mold either. I think in a lot of ways, it's a different arsenal and a different way, but like, in a lot of ways, there's a world where Holiday could end up being their Gallen. I know like I'm not high on Holiday that way, but keep in mind that Gallen wasn't Gallen until he was Gallen, and there is an avenue for Holiday to be that. That's not to diminish that. It's just that like those big arms that they've drafted, they either get hurt and fizzle out, or they never find the pitchability of it all to make it work. And if you've been doing the same job for 20 years and this thing keeps coming up, this keeps coming up, this keeps coming up, you could almost understand why they'd be like, look, it doesn't work for us for whatever reason. We're just going to find some pitchability pitchers that have some interesting traits and run with it. Which I get, but this year in particular, my big criticism is you don't have a second round pick. You have to nail that third round pick, and you got conservative.
All right, everybody. Sorry for having to cut that out so abruptly, but we ran out of time tonight. So hopefully you all enjoyed our discussion. Wanted to thank again Kyle and Blake for joining us. If you don't already, highly recommend giving them a follow. Kyle is running Birds on the Black is his podcast. He's also online as well, as is Blake. He is a writer for Cardinal Nation and Viva Birdos, so feel free to check them out as well. And thanks for joining us tonight. We will see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Take care.